Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 2, Episode 23, Response to AI-Generated Criticisms of Gordon.
All right, Eric, let's see what ChatGPT thinks about music learning theory.
Yeah.
So I typed into, for anyone not familiar, by the way, ChatGPT is it's an AI language-based program, or how would you describe this?
It's like the ultimate Google. You ask it the question, no matter how bad your English is or whatever, it comes back with the answer, and you don't have to even click on a link.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be fun. Literally, this is what I typed in. Criticize Edwin Gordon's music learning theory. So we'll just get right to the good stuff here. So the response that it gave me has 3 criticisms. Let's just go through each one of them. And by the way, like, where is ChatGPT statements from? It's from the internet at large. So these are actually saying somewhere on the internet.
Yeah, prior to 2019, 2020. So it scraped the web all that time. Might have another year, but it's not good for like recent events, anything in the last year or two.
Sure. All right. Okay, first off, some critics argue that Gordon's theory places too much emphasis on the development of audiation skills and does not take into account other important, such as technical proficiency and performance skills. Important component. It is not the only one. And it's important to balance the development of audiation skills with other aspects of music education. So let's take a moment and have a good laugh here.
I got to take a deep breath.
I think there's a grain of truth to this, but not at large. I think more there can be a specific attempt to implement MLT in the classroom where someone could very well be basically just doing a 30-minute LSA with their students, or only like drilling, tonal patterns. But I mean, if you look at any teacher who's actually using MLT skillfully, this is just totally ridiculous criticism.
It's funny to me. You teach an instrument, they need to know how to put the thing together, right? They need how to, not how to finger, there's stuff you need to do. And all that stuff, sure, doesn't involve audiation. Sit up straight. Or maybe that is an audiation. I don't know. Tap your foot. There's just so much that is not audiational in music education, but underneath that, what's that supposed to get you to? To where you understand music. And anybody that says it's overemphasized, well, then you're not emphasizing being musical. You're emphasizing something else. Let's not even go further on that. That's silly.
Well, the other thing I'd like to just say about this quickly is, like, we had Eric Bluestein on the podcast a while ago, and we were talking to him about, in a music classroom, there's a large facts about music in terms of, like, cultural facts or, like, theoretical facts that aren't teaching music. And it's very easy to confuse yourself that, you're teaching kids how to audiate music and perform music and play music when you're actually just teaching them about music. You're teaching them the names of composers and the names of the cultures the music came from. And, like, he brought up a really good point. I think he was talking about, like, Hebrew music, if I'm not mistaken, if my memory. But he was saying, like, the actual cultural tradition, there are facts about that cultural tradition that are worth teaching, but that's a history lesson. That's not a music lesson. And the true culture of of that music is transmitted by playing and performing and audiating that music. It's not from learning just the facts. And so I'm okay with history being smuggled in, as long as you're very conscious of what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with anything being smuggled in that it's not ever overemphasized. It's hardly ever emphasized. In general. There's just so much more to teaching music than audiation, but
sure,
but it's just silly that they don't. this OpenAI GPT-3 doesn't know the value of the word audiation.
It almost this is a pretty crude analogy, so you shield young ears if they're listening. It's almost like saying, there's more to having sex than than making love.
That's pretty.
All right. Secondly, some critics argue that Gordon's theory is too prescriptive and does not allow for individual differences in learning styles and music preferences. While it is important to provide a structured approach to music education, it's also important to allow for individual differences in learning styles and musical interests. Oh, ChatGPT, you're really breaking my heart here. We haven't gone on a full matrix deep dive on learning styles, but learning styles are
bogus,
completely empirically false. What's not false is learning preferences. So I do want to steelman the argument a little bit. People have preferences for how they want to learn. Some people want to play piano instead of guitar. Some people want to do more of some kind of activities instead of another. But to make the claim that those are actual learning styles, especially with music, is a great example. I had a couple students, Eric, who I started teaching them guitar, but they had been taking piano for a few years. I teach every song on the guitar by memory first. We don't use notation,
right,
especially when they're beginning. And these students didn't like that because they grew up from a decoding heavy piano teacher that I had for years. And one of them was like, well, I don't really learn like this. I need to see the notes first. And I'm like, it's not really a learning style thing. You can't have a style of you can have a preference to want to learn to play music from decoding first. That's totally valid. But there's not an actual learning style in this. I mean, music is learned through audiation. I mean, that's just how it's learned. So I get kind of frustrated when I see this.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about this?
You don't listen to a picture, right?
That's a much more eloquent way to say what I just said.
Look at this pretty picture. Okay, let's listen to it. Or, what colors do you hear on Beethoven's Fifth? Let's draw to the music in kindergarten, right? How do you feel when you listen to this music? This is completely besides the point.
Yeah, and it also leads to this other conversation that you've written about on your website. You have an article about this, but people kind of act like we should learn music for its social aspect or for its emotional aspect or for its supposed IQ raising benefits. But I mean, music, the experience of audiating in itself is such a fundamental human experience. It's worth exploring for its own sake. It does not have to be justified for its benefit on culture or personal development or learning or self-discipline. But people always try to make learning music about these other benefits. It's not about learning how to play music. It's about learning how to get these secondary benefits, which some of them are actually quite real. Yeah. But the whole motivation is totally suspicious.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, it's pretty solidly known that, at least through the research that I've looked at, done by Peter Gazuisis, where he got rid of any possible factors other than people playing instruments had higher correlation with their grades than anything else, and choral did not have the same effect. So something about instrumental music did. And he got that down pretty tight in his research, saying that if you play an instrument, that you're going to raise your say your IQ or your SAT or other measures.
Sure.
So there is that benefit,
but not choral. So that is so interesting.
Yeah, he's interested to get deeper into it, but
maybe just the process of learning how to play a mechanical object and make true audiation out of it requires your IQ to go up. But not singing. I mean, because singing is not like usually the way singing teachers are going to hate what I'm about to say now. But singing, I feel like, doesn't fall into the same conceptual traps as playing instruments do to a large degree. Now, a lot of singing teachers are going to say like, no, we teach singing technique and how to focus on your vocal cords and your body. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you take a group of kids and say like, hey, let's start singing. It's largely not conceptual. They can largely just focus on the sounds they're making, and you give them a little guidance like, oh, that's not your singing voice. That's your whispering or your talking voice. But a lot of it just bypasses the need to think. You just...
Yeah,
so maybe that's
when I was in chorus, even in college, of course, I wasn't audiating, so I was just imitating the guys next to me that were good singers. So I didn't have to learn to audiate. I didn't have to do the same kinds of things. And of course, you're not extrapolating that out into your body coordination. There's body coordination in terms of breathing and singing, but it's less specific than it is.
Sure.
And more individual than it is to learn your fingerings and other physical and technical aspects. So I think it's operating more of the brain that's all.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex and the motor cortex, I'm sure, is quite different, lit up differently than it is if you're a choral singer. So it's just more of the brain being used. And I think that music might be the ultimate synesthetic thing that could like group these things together.
Sure.
Possibly. I don't know.
I'm not sure if you know about this, but did Gazuis's research show that learning more instruments heightened the effect than just learning a single one?
I don't think he went after that. He eliminated every variable he could.
Interesting, because I'm wondering, like I don't even know how many instruments I can play, Eric. It's ridiculous, but
it's a large N too, so that helped.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I want to say about this critique is that in terms of agreeing with it, I do think that sometimes teachers can get way too rigid with their curriculum and their ideas of what has to be taught and how it has to be taught, and people become insensitive to how students are responding. So in that sense, I do agree with this issue of like rigidity can cause issues with learning in students, essentially. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, and you've almost have like a slogan, like, learn from the kids. But, if the kids are really digging something you're giving them, I mean, my philosophy is milk it, right? If you've already got free attention, like if they're not having to work to focus on something and they're learning and they're like, yeah, let's keep playing the song over and over again, start throwing little inference activities and seeing the differences at it. And I think if
turn it to minor,
too rigid,
take it up a step, do a bunch of things, add harmony to it, add bass line to it, add licks to it, add get them into small groups, do 4 at a time. That's hard. That's hard work if everybody's on a different part.
So, and related to that is just like I don't think learning styles are a thing, but I do very much think learning preferences are a thing. Like this student I was teaching a couple days ago, she loves improv. Like she's a new piano student that I have, but she's just a monster audiator. And she's like 7, and she loves improv. And we spend like 20 out of the 30 minutes just improvising. And I'm like guiding her. Sometimes I'll be playing certain chords, seeing if she can work over that. But I always stop the lesson every few minutes. I'm like, hey, what do you want to do next? And she's like, I want to make my own songs. And so like, she clearly has a preference for doing these kinds of activities in the classroom, and I see no reason why it's harming her learning at all. If anything, I wish I could get more students on the improv train like she is, but I'll just put my foot on the gas on that a little bit. And so I think if you're too rigid sometimes, it can...
Music learning theory, how it's been laid out, is too prescriptive. That you're going to do the easy pattern with the kids who are, low to moderate aptitude, right, and all that. That just takes too much time to get the result that you can get quicker. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that, this is a way for you to look at, if you look at music learning theory, the whole purpose of the thing is to make learning easier so that you can be audiating. So you are addressing individual differences, just not in this prescriptive model that we have, where I just give all the kids all the patterns, and they have to deal with them the way they deal with them. The listening vocabulary is the worst that's happening.
Sure.
So if they can't audiate it yet, so
yeah, that's a good point.
So it's two sides of a coin there, and AI is just funny. Go ahead. What's next?
Okay. Finally, some critics argue that Gordon's theory is too focused on the cognitive aspects of music learning and does not take into account the emotional and social aspects of music making. While the development of audiation skills is important, it is also important to consider the emotional and social benefits of music making, such as self-expression, communication, and collaboration. This is... there's obviously some grains of truth here, not in terms of every MLT teacher is falling into this. I just think, no matter what you're learning or talking about, no matter what domain, you can always pull the social card. You can always say, well, what are the social and cultural ramifications of this? Because humans are social and cultural beings. But in a sense, I sometimes think that this can get so emphasized that we're like turning kids into sociologists. And so I'm not discounting the role of culture in music at all. I mean, I think the music probably evolved in terms of its cultural benefits to unify people and bring people together in experience and all that. I fully agree with that. And I mean, playing with a jazz group is almost like being in a tribe of people.
Well, for sure.
You get to know them that intimately. And so I don't discount that. And I think there should be more group interactions with young musicians and all of that. But sometimes I think when we start to, you do need hard lines at some point, and thinking that just putting more kids in cultural music experiences is going to teach them audiation, it's just not true in essentially. And so there's no reason to put these at odds with each other.
No,
but
yeah, one thing that comes up to me is like there's no learning sequence for emotive. I guess you can learn forte, piano. You can learn crescendo, decrescendo, like information or whatever. But doesn't matter which comes first. And I think the thing that needs to come first is like the modeling of this emotional content, and that music is life. Like there's a lot of life in music. Bring that to it, and Gordon just bring that to your teaching. Put that in your teaching, but there's no sequence, so I don't really want to think about it or talk about it because there's not like a way to break that down and make it easier for you to teach. It's just part of music. And he was just so anti music and emotion and music people, these strongholds of the anti-Gordon folks. Like,
well, this idea of music and emotion is very interesting because for a lot of people, the teaching of like labeling minor as sad or minor as evil or whatever, you can bring emotion into the equation. But this is what I was talking about before, is like sometimes I think we can almost think that the point of music is emotions. And I think that is profoundly mistaken. I think that we don't want to discount the role that emotions can have in listening to a piece of music, because when we listen to a beautiful piece, it can summon, the audiation can summon emotions. I have no doubt of that. But that's a very different statement to make than saying that the point of music is to elicit emotions, which is, I think, incorrect. The point of music is to experience the music. And that's what audiation is. It's literally to the experience of music. And sometimes emotions come with that, but I think it's a false false in a certain sense, like, because anyone can do what they want. If you say you're an artist and the point for you is self-expression and emotion, go for it. I don't care. But to make the sweeping claim that for everyone, the point of music is emotional at its root, I don't think is entirely defensible. I think it's a part of music making, but it's not the point of music making is to create emotion. It's not the only point.
Case in point, 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Well, I think maybe the emotion that's supposed to be gleaned from that is the pure mystery of the universe.
The anger.
So, And Eric, you've talked about this, like with what I was saying before. Sometimes we coach kids into thinking that certain tonalities have certain emotional qualities with them, but I personally don't find that. I mean, I find that the emotion that comes out of a tonality is almost more related to the style than the tonality, because minor can sound cool when it's played with a swing, but it can sound sad when it's played another way, and it's so subjective in terms of what people associate.
Well, except that I think that so many of my kids watch the same movies, and the movies have imprinted that these are sad or scary, and of course, that's what they use in the movies. They use minor, so.
Great
so they've
example
been
of this,
acculturated that way, and so they've come in and said
Exactly.
that sounds sad, and I'm like, who taught you that? You're 3.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're getting it from the movies.
I brought this piece to a teacher that I had when I was like 18 or 19, and it was a Lydian piece that kept like moving up in minor thirds, that modulation that I like, that I've talked about before. And he was like, yeah, this is kind of a nice piece. It's got this like happy feeling. And I was like, whoa, like that does not sound happy to me. Like Lydian, like that was really almost disgusting to me to have someone describe it like that, because Lydian, like to me, has this more like mystical longing quality to it, and that's my own that's what I thought of the piece, and to hear him describe it as this like happy, carefree, I was like, wow, like we're clearly coming at this from
There's no
places.
truth in either one, so just enjoy for what it is, but lay audiation down at the foundation before you start adding other layers on top, because I don't think you've got to be able to audiate the emotion anyway into it. So I think there's an audiation
Sure.
of besides the tonal and the rhythm, but it doesn't need to be taught. It's just modeled, because you don't teach those expressive elements other than modeling them. I mean, there's no sequence to it.
So I do think there's grains of truth in this, in terms of you can develop such a mechanistic view of what music learning is, and in the classroom, like everything is just about ticking boxes of tonal patterns and rhythm patterns, and you can kind of shun all this other stuff out. But this is the problem with art, is that, and I remember listening to Ayn Rand talk about like her ideas of what art is that everyone has ideas of what art is.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily, art has different roles for different people at different times. You can't make sweeping claims about like the purpose of art is to represent reality in a romantic fashion and to display man's purpose as a heroic being. Like that's like Ayn Rand's like view of art, and in some sense I'm like, damn, I like that, but in another sense I'm like, how can that be true for everyone?
Yeah.
Like they just,
I don't know about her philosophy too much.
she's
So
an
I did my
interesting
own.
lady.
I did my own Google here.
Okay.
My chat bot said lack of empirical evidence, which has gotten 50 years more of research. That's like ridiculous. Complexity, that it's too complex. Well, isn't learning complex? So like, there's a vast array of concepts, terminology, and principles, which can be overwhelming for some learners and teachers. It's like, because you don't understand it, it's overwhelming. So learn to understand it before you can say it's just too complex. It is complex until you get into it. A rocket scientist doesn't think it's too complex to talk about, boost load or whatever. I don't know what the terms are. Sure. Limited applicability. It focused primarily on the development of music aptitude. So critics argue that theory may not be suitable for adult learners or those who are already proficient in music. These are just, I don't know, I'm just saying these because it's too narrow a focus on the development of aptitude and not adequately address other aspects of music education, such as creativity, performance, and music history. Again, here's the public, I think this is like the public consciousness of,
That's what it is.
the lack of diversity. Well, change your content so there's more cultural relevance to the population you're teaching, in addition to, how do you understand your own culture? Well, you study other people's cultures and see how you don't match with that, or where you do match. So these things are kind of funny, but I thought it was a cool idea to see what ChatGPT said about Gordon. We should ask it what's good about Gordon. And do an episode.
Yeah, fair enough.
That.
I thought it'd be more fun to to hear the criticisms.
I'm angry.
And the other thing I wanted to say about this, like this final critique that it had on my search about it not being inclusive of the emotional and social and personal self-expression and all these other benefits, is that if I have a student and I'm a one-on-one teacher and they tell me, like, the point of me being here is to connect with music at an emotional level and have a hobby that I can, like, sink into, I'm probably going to help them focus on that more than just giving them... I might get them to sing tonal patterns and rhythm patterns, but I'm probably not going to give them a complete theoretical, explanation in class about how music learning theory works. But if I have another student who's like, I really want to understand how people learn music and I want to learn to audiate at the same time, like I want to know both, then I'm going to change what I talk about to serve what they're actually there for. And this is part of what I was saying before. It's like people have different ideas of what art is or what they want to do in a music classroom. And this gets more difficult when you're teaching young kids because they don't necessarily have fully formed opinions. I mean, I think the opinion of a lot of them is like, let's have some fun. And that's good to honor too. But you can change what you're doing. It doesn't have to be like a hyper theoretical, it's like some people just want to ride the roller coaster and some people want to know about like why the roller coaster works in terms of physics, and they're both fine. And some people want both.
Yep.
Well, maybe we'll do this search again in a couple of years and see what it says.
By then we'll have dominated the airwaves.
Hopefully.
All right, let's call that.
All right, till next time. That's fun.